What if I told you that the strongest response to disrespect isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it isn't a clever comeback or a speech that leaves the room silent? The greatest power you can show in the face of disrespect is silence. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But here's the part most people never learn. The true skill is not reacting at all. It's choosing stillness over chaos, absence over arguments, quiet confidence over desperate explanations. Think about it. When someone disrespects you, your natural instinct is to fight back, to defend yourself, to say something that will sting them just enough so they never dare again. But how often does that actually work? How many times has your anger really changed someone? Most of the time, it only drags you down to their level. Silence, however, does something different. Silence confuses. Silence disrupts patterns. Silence becomes a mirror that forces people to confront themselves. When you don't play their game, they have no one left to perform for, no one to manipulate, no one to blame. Suddenly, the weight of their own actions presses down on them, and you didn't have to say a word. This isn't about turning the other cheek in some naive way. It's about reclaiming your power by refusing to waste it. Stoicism teaches us that your energy, your presence, and your inner peace are sacred. They're not public property. And when you withdraw those things quietly, calmly, without drama, you shift the entire balance of power. Let me ask you, how many times in your life have you stayed longer than you should have? In a friendship, in a job, in a relationship, hoping things would change, hoping they'd see your worth, hoping your patience would finally pay off. And what did it cost you? If you're honest, the answer is often exhaustion, burnout, a piece of your self-respect. The Stoics would argue that the real weakness is not in walking away, it's in staying chained to people who don't value you. Silence is not surrender, it's strategy. It's the discipline of stepping back when every part of your ego wants to step forward. And here's what makes silence so powerful. It doesn't need permission. You don't need them to understand why you're quiet. You don't need them to agree. You don't even need them to notice. Silence is powerful because it's yours. It's the one weapon they can't disarm. Epictetus also said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And mastery begins the moment you stop letting someone else control your reactions. Because let's be honest, anyone can yell, anyone can argue, anyone can explode. That's easy. But to sit in calm silence, to remove your presence, to choose peace when chaos begs for your attention, that's rare. That's strength. In this video, we're going to break down 7 silent moves that make people regret ever crossing you. Moves that don't require revenge, explanation, or even words. Just stillness, just clarity, just you, valuing your peace above their opinion. So if you've ever been disrespected, underestimated, or taken for granted, by the end of these 7 moves, you'll understand why silence isn't weakness, it's the loudest statement you'll ever make. Before we begin, I want you to reflect on this question. What would happen if, instead of reacting, you chose silence? Instead of explaining, you simply walked away? That's where we're going. And by the end of this video, you'll see that silence doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. So let's dive into the first silent move. Silent. Move 1. Withdraw. Access without explanation. There comes a moment in life when the most powerful thing you can do isn't raising your voice. It isn't defending yourself one more time or crafting the perfect argument that proves you were right all along. No, the real power lies in quietly walking away, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because here's the truth most people miss. Your energy is not a public service. It's not something the world is entitled to. And yet, people often act like it island. They depend on your patience. They depend on your silence. They depend on your consistency because it benefits their chaos. As long as you keep showing up, they don't have to face themselves. Think about the times someone disrespected you repeatedly. Maybe it was a friend who always dismissed your feelings, a partner who took your kindness for granted, or even a coworker who thrived on drama. How many times did you explain, argue, or try to make them understand? That's the trap. They expect your reaction, whether it's anger, tears, or explanations, because it keeps the cycle alive. It gives them a role to play. It feeds their sense of control. But when you withdraw access, when you simply stop showing up, you break that cycle in a way they never anticipated. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, reminded us that we suffer not from the events themselves, but from our judgment about them. When you walk away quietly, you're not punishing them, you're freeing yourself. You're shifting the focus from what they did to how you choose to respond. And the choice is silence. Let me give you a picture. Imagine someone who thrives on confrontation. They push your buttons, waiting for the explosion, because your reaction validates their behavior. Now imagine what happens when you don't react, when instead of fighting back, you disappear. No long explanations, no dramatic exit, just absence. Suddenly they're left alone with their own behavior. No audience, no fuel, no one to blame. That silence becomes unbearable because it turns into a mirror. Without your justifications clouding the air, they're forced to confront the raw reflection of their own actions. That's when the regret begins. Not because you shouted, but because you stopped playing the game. And here's where the discipline comes in. Withdrawing access doesn't mean sulking or trying to make them chase you. It means reclaiming your peace. It's a conscious choice to stop investing your time, energy, and emotional labor in people who continually dishonor it. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. Of course, it's not easy, especially when the disrespect comes from someone close to you. The urge to explain, to seek closure, to make them see your pain, that urge is strong. But the Stoics would tell you, closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. You might fear that walking away makes you look weak, but think carefully. Is it weakness to remove yourself from a toxic cycle? Or is it weakness to stay trapped in it? Epictetus would challenge you with a question. If someone has harmed you, why add to the injury by remaining entangled? When you withdraw access, you send a powerful message without speaking. Over time, that silence echoes louder than any speech you could have given. They remember you not as angry or broken, but as someone who had the strength to walk away. And in that haunting silence, their own conscience begins to do the work. So remember this, withdrawing is not revenge, it's evolution. It's not bitterness, it's boundaries. You are not abandoning them, you are preserving yourself. And that decision, though quiet, is one of the loudest declarations of self-respect you will ever make. The first silent move is simple, but not easy. Withdraw access without explanation. No speeches, no drama, just stillness. Let your absence be the answer. Because when they realize they no longer have access to your time, your mind, your soul. Silent move 2. Level up in private. One of the most misunderstood forms of power is growth. The kind of growth no one sees coming, not the kind you post online, not the kind you announce to the world, but the kind that happens in silence. In a society obsessed with proving, posting, and performing, choosing to grow privately is almost revolutionary. And yet, it's the most threatening thing you can do to those who once disrespected you. Why? Because they expected you to stay stuck. They counted on you being predictable, reactive, wounded, emotionally available whenever they needed a target. But when you start leveling up quietly, you shatter their expectations. Think about it. Maybe there's someone in your life who always doubted you, who told you you'd never change, who dismissed your potential as nothing more than wishful thinking. What happens when you stop arguing with them and instead start changing? Not with words, but with actions. Not with explanations, but with transformation. Suddenly, they're faced with a version of you they no longer recognize. This is where Stoicism becomes so practical. Epictetus taught that everything, external status, what is within our control is our inner life, our choices, our focus. That's why true freedom comes from investing inward, not chasing validation outward. When you redirect your energy from proving others wrong to building yourself up, you step into what the Stoics called real strength. Let me give you a picture. Imagine someone who always thrives on knowing your next move. They're used to you explaining yourself, defending yourself, reacting to every slight. But now, you go quiet. You don't explain. You don't post. You just start working. You pour into your health, your reading, your goals, your financial stability, your peace of mind. You become unpredictable. And that unpredictability shakes them because the script they relied on no longer exists. Here's the beauty. Leveling up privately isn't about revenge, it's about rebirth. You're not proving anything to them, you're proving something to yourself. And when you do that, the change is deeper, more lasting, more authentic. Over time, it shows up in ways you can't fake in your posture, in your tone, in the way you carry yourself. People notice, even those who once dismissed you. And here's where the irony kicks in. The very people who doubted you will start to wonder. They may pretend not to care, but they feel the shift. Because your silence is no longer empty, it's full of progress. The Stoics would say, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And that's exactly what this move is about. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, every time you choose clarity over chaos, every time you choose peace over noise, you're embodying Stoic strength. You're leveling up in a way that no critic can touch. Let me ask you a question. How many hours of your life have you wasted trying to explain yourself to people who never intended to understand you? How much energy have you spent chasing approval from those who were committed to doubting you? What if you took that same energy and invested it in becoming undeniable? That's the real win, not their recognition, not their apology. The less you crave validation, the less you care about their opinions. And here's the best part. When you level up in private, you build a foundation they can't shake. They can talk, gossip, minimize. But deep down, they'll know they lost access to a version of you they once took for granted. And you'll be too busy building to care. So remember this. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. Sometimes it means everything is happening, just where no one can see. And one day, when your growth becomes undeniable, they'll realize the truth while they were watching for a reaction. You were quietly building a life they can no longer reach. That's the power of silent move 2. Level up in private, not for them, for you. Silent move 3. Become emotionally unavailable. There comes a point when silence is no longer just a pause, it becomes a decision. A deliberate step out of the emotional ring where people once pulled your strings. You're not playing their game anymore. You're not letting anyone dictate your mood or drag you into endless arguments. That's when you begin to practice one of the most liberating moves of all, becoming emotionally unavailable. Now let's be clear. Emotional unavailability isn't about being cold or heartless. It's not about shutting yourself off from life. It's about discipline. It's about learning to allocate your emotions wisely, giving access only to the people and situations that deserve them. Most of us hand out our emotional energy like free samples at a grocery store, reacting to every insult, every criticism, every petty comment. And where does that leave us? Drained, exhausted, controlled. But imagine what happens when you stop, when you no longer rise to every provocation, when you see the bait and choose not to bite. Suddenly the power dynamic shifts. The people who once thrived on your reactions begin to unravel. because their chaos echoes louder in the silence of your detachment. Think about Princess Diana in the later years of her life. She stopped defending herself publicly. She stopped playing the royal game that constantly tried to define her. Instead, she chose dignity. She chose silence. She walked away from the dysfunction and focused on her mission quietly, strategically, with purpose. And what happened? The same press that once fed on her vulnerability began to respect her composure. That's the power of emotional unavailability. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by the view we take of them. When you detach emotionally, you're not saying, "I don't care about anything." You're saying, "I refuse to let what's outside my control dictate my inner peace." That's not indifference, that's wisdom. Ask yourself this: how many times have you explained yourself to people who weren't really listening? How many times have you let someone's opinion ruin your day, even though their words had no real weight? How often have you attended arguments you were invited to, only to regret showing up? Becoming emotionally unavailable is how you break that cycle. And here's the irony: people notice. They can sense when your energy no longer revolves around them. The way you stop flinching when they enter the room, the way you don't rush to reply, the way your smile no longer depends on their approval. At first, they'll test you, pushing harder to provoke a reaction. But when none comes, when you remain steady, calm, and untouchable, they begin to realize the old version of you is gone. This is emotional sovereignty, the refusal to let others rent space in your mind. It doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you feel deeply, but you choose where to invest that depth. You no longer waste your heart on people who trample it. You no longer give your peace to those who haven't earned it. The Stoics would call this true freedom, the ability to stay still while the world demands a reaction, to remain anchored while others try to shake you, to be the calm in the storm instead of becoming the storm itself. And make no mistake, this isn't about revenge. It's not about punishing them with silence. It's about protecting yourself. Because the more emotionally unavailable you become to people who don't deserve your energy, the more available you become for the things that matter: your growth, your purpose, your peace. So the next time someone tries to push your buttons, ask yourself, do they deserve my reaction? Do they deserve my energy? Or do they deserve my silence? That's the move. Silent move. 3. Become emotionally unavailable. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to walk away from emotional chaos and stand firmly in your own peace. Your challenge this week is simple, but not easy. Pick one situation in your life where someone usually provokes a reaction out of you. Maybe it's a coworker who always criticizes, a family member who knows your weak spots, or even a friend who constantly drains your energy. And the challenge: do not react. No long explanation, no defensive reply, no emotional performance. Instead, practice emotional unavailability. Step back, stay calm, choose silence. Then, after the moment passes, reflect on how it felt. Did you feel weaker or stronger? Did the situation lose some of its power over you? Finally, share your experience in the comments. Where did you practice emotional unavailability this week? Your story might inspire someone else who needs the reminder that silence is strength. Silent move 4. Enforce boundaries silently. There's a quiet kind of power that most people overlook. It's not in shouting, not in ultimatums, not in writing long emotional messages. It's in boundaries, the kind you set without ever announcing them. Because real boundaries don't need a speech. They don't require everyone's approval. They simply exist in the way you choose to stop participating. Think about it. The people who drain you, the ones who constantly disrespect your time, your energy, your presence. They thrive on your willingness to keep explaining. They count on your desire to be understood. And every time you explain, you're still in the cycle. But when you quietly step back, when you stop answering the late-night texts, stop saying yes to people who never ask how you're doing, stop showing up where your presence is only taken for granted, that's when the shift begins. At first, they won't understand it. They'll call you distant, moody, maybe even accuse you of being passive-aggressive. But over time, they begin to realize the truth. It's not that you're punishing them, it's that you've recalibrated your standards, and they no longer meet them. The Stoics would agree. Epictetus warned against revenge because he saw it as a kind of emotional debt. It ties you to the very people who hurt you. Revenge keeps you rehearsing the same pain, replaying the same offense, waiting for them to finally get it. But why waste your life waiting? True freedom doesn't come from revenge. It comes from stepping away, quietly, firmly, without guilt. Let me ask you, how many times have you stayed in conversations you didn't want to have, just to avoid conflict? How many times have you agreed to something you resented later because you didn't want to seem difficult? How much energy have you lost managing other people's dysfunction while your own growth sat waiting on the sidelines? When you enforce boundaries silently, you end that cycle. You stop trading your peace for temporary comfort. You stop betraying yourself just to keep the peace with others. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. You'll feel the urge to explain, to justify, to make them understand. But here's the truth. The people who truly value you won't need explanations. They'll respect your limits naturally. The ones who push, guilt trip, or question your boundaries are usually the very ones who benefited from you not having any. So how do you practice this in daily life? It could be as simple as letting a phone call go unanswered when you know it will drain you. As simple as not replying to that text that never leads anywhere good. As simple as declining an invitation without offering a paragraph-long excuse. And here's the surprising part. When you enforce boundaries silently, you begin to attract different kinds of people. The ones who respect time, energy, and dignity. The ones who bring peace instead of chaos. Because life has a way of reflecting the standards you set for yourself. Remember, this isn't about shutting the world out. It's about protecting the part of you that the world constantly tries to take. It's about honoring your own well-being so deeply that you stop apologizing for it. And once you do, the noise around you begins to fade. The chaos quiets down. You stop carrying resentment because you no longer stay where respect is missing. Epictetus put it perfectly. No person is free who is not master of himself. And part of mastering yourself is mastering your boundaries. Not loudly, not dramatically, but silently, with strength and clarity. So the next time you feel the urge to explain why you're stepping back, pause. Don't explain, don't defend, just enforce. Because boundaries aren't about changing others, they're about changing what you allow. And once you start doing that, you'll realize something powerful. That's the essence of Silent Move 4. Enforce boundaries silently. No announcements, no revenge, just clarity, consistency, and the kind of strength that speaks louder than words ever could. Silent Move 5. Disappear with dignity. There comes a time when silence itself is no longer enough. When disrespect continues, when your boundaries are tested over and over, when your worth is ignored despite your patience, that's when the most powerful move left is to leave. Not with anger, not with revenge, not with a dramatic exit, but quietly, calmly, with dignity. And here's the key. Disappearing with dignity is not running away. It's not weakness. It's not surrender. To the life you were meant to build without the weight of constant disrespect holding you down. Think about it. People who mistreat you often rely on one dangerous assumption, that no matter what they do, you'll keep showing up. They depend on your loyalty, on your forgiveness, on your willingness to explain and explain until you have nothing left. But what happens when one day you simply stop showing up? When you choose stillness over explanation, absence over argument, That absence becomes the loudest message you could ever deliver. The Stoics taught us that real freedom comes from letting go of what we cannot control, including the need for apologies, closure, or understanding. Epictetus warned against tying your peace to things outside your power, because doing so is a form of slavery. And isn't that exactly what happens when we keep waiting for someone else to recognize our worth? We hand them the keys to our peace. But disappearing with dignity is different. It says, I no longer place my peace in your hands. You stop begging to be seen. You stop waiting to be understood. You stop trying to fix what you didn't break. Instead, you walk away not to punish them, but to protect yourself. Let me give you a picture. Imagine you're in a room full of noise, people arguing, blaming, trying to pull you into their chaos. Every instinct tells you to shout back, to defend yourself, to win the argument. But instead, you quietly stand, open the door, and walk out. The argument continues, but without you, and slowly the people left in the room realize the silence where your presence used to be. That's what disappearing with dignity feels like. And here's the part most people don't expect. Your absence is harder to ignore than your words ever were. Because while anger can be dismissed and arguments can be debated, silence leaves no room for excuses. It forces them to confront themselves, to feel the weight of what they lost. Not because you made them regret it, but because you finally valued yourself more than their approval. Of course, this isn't easy. Walking away without closure can feel like tearing a piece of yourself apart. Your ego screams for a final conversation, one last chance to make them understand. But the Stoics remind us, closure doesn't come from others, it comes from the choices we make. And the choice to leave with dignity is one of the strongest you will ever make. Ask yourself, how many times have you stayed too long, hoping for change that never came? How many times have you explained, justified, or begged for respect that should have been freely given? And where did it lead? To exhaustion, to resentment, to self-doubt. But disappearing with dignity leads somewhere different. It leads to rebirth, to a new life where your energy isn't drained by chaos. That's the beauty of this final silent move. It's not about revenge, it's about evolution. It's not about bitterness, it's about boundaries. By leaving, you don't just close a door on others, you open one for yourself. You create space for new relationships, new opportunities, new peace. Epictetus would call this self-mastery, the ability to walk away from what no longer serves your higher self, even when you once cared deeply for it. That's why disappearing with dignity isn't just an ending, it's a beginning. So remember this, when respect is gone and peace is broken, don't waste your voice trying to prove your worth. Let your silence and your absence speak for you, because sometimes the most powerful message you'll ever deliver is the one you deliver by leaving. That's silent move 5. Disappear with dignity. Not as an escape, but as a declaration. My peace matters more. And when you embrace that truth, you'll find that walking away isn't the end of your story. It's the start of a better one. Silent move 6. Master the art of indifference. After you've walked away with dignity, there's one more step that takes your strength to an entirely new level. It's learning to master the art of indifference. Because walking away ends the noise outside, but indifference silences the noise inside. Now, let's make this clear. Indifference doesn't mean you feel nothing. It doesn't mean you stop caring about life. It means you learn to redirect your care. You no longer waste your attention on gossip, disrespect, or petty provocations. Instead, you choose to care about what actually matters: your own thoughts, your own actions, your own character. The Stoics understood this perfectly. Epictetus said, "We are disturbed not by things, but by the view we take of them." And that's the essence of indifference. It's not about shutting off your emotions, it's about refusing to let the wrong things dictate them. Think about how often people get under your skin. A coworker spreads rumors, A friend throws a passive-aggressive comment. A stranger on social media tries to bait you. Your natural instinct is to react, to defend yourself, to prove a point. But what happens when you don't? When their words don't land, when their noise doesn't move you, when you simply refuse to play the part they scripted for you? Something powerful happens. They lose their weapon. Indifference disarms people. Because provocation only works if you're willing to be provoked. Their gossip only matters if you give it weight. Their disrespect only hurts if you let it define you. But when you master the art of indifference, you take that power back. Let me give you an image. Imagine someone throws a stone into the ocean. What happens? The stone sinks, the waves absorb it, and the ocean remains vast, calm, unbothered. Now imagine someone throws the same stone into a small glass of water. The water splashes everywhere, disturbed and unsettled. Which do you want your mind to be, an ocean or a glass? Indifference makes you the ocean. Of course, this is easier said than done. It takes practice. At first, you'll feel the urge to react, to defend, to prove yourself. But with time, you'll discover something amazing. Not every battle requires your presence. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every critic deserves your energy. And here's the irony: when people realize they can't shake you, it shakes them. They expected you to argue. They expected you to flinch. They expected you to explain. But when you respond with calm detachment, when their chaos echoes into silence, they begin to feel the weight of their own behavior. Your indifference becomes their mirror. The Stoics called this sovereignty of the mind. It's a state where no one can enter unless you open the door. No insult, no rumor, no betrayal can touch you unless you allow it. That's true freedom. Not being free from challenges, but being free from letting those challenges control you. Ask yourself, how much of your peace have you lost reacting to things that didn't matter a week later? How many hours have you spent replaying conversations with people who weren't even thinking about you? What could you have built with all that energy if you had chosen indifference instead? Mastering this art is not about becoming passive. It's about becoming selective. It's about saving your fire for battles that matter and walking past the ones that don't. Because in the end, indifference is not emptiness. It's focus. It's the discipline of saying, I care deeply, but only about what deserves my care. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Because the moment you choose silence, the moment you choose indifference, you've already won. That's silent move 6. Master the art of indifference. It's not weakness, it's sovereignty. It's not carelessness, it's clarity. And when you embrace it, you discover the greatest freedom of all, the freedom to decide what and who gets access to your peace. Silent move 7. Live as your own standard. This is the final step in the journey of silence. After walking away, after growing in private, after setting boundaries and mastering indifference, there comes a point where you no longer measure your life by anyone else's opinion. You begin to live as your own standard. What does that mean? It means you stop chasing approval. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who never believed in you. You stop bending your life around the shifting expectations of others. Instead, you anchor yourself to your own values, discipline, self-respect, and inner calm. The Stoics captured this beautifully. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinion than our own." Living as your own standard means reversing that mistake. It means valuing your own principles above the fleeting applause or criticism of others. Think about how much of your life has been shaped by the need to be seen a certain way. Maybe you stayed in a job because of what people might think if you left. Maybe you tolerated disrespect in a relationship because you didn't want to look weak. Maybe you overextended yourself just to avoid being misunderstood. Living by other people's standards is a silent prison, and most people never realize they're locked inside. But when you live by your own standard, you unlock the door. You walk freely, guided not by the noise outside, but by the compass within. And here's the powerful part. The very people who once underestimated you will see the difference. They'll notice that you no longer react, no longer explain, no longer try to fit into the cycle of prove, react, defend. They'll see that your presence carries a new weight. Ask yourself this: what do you stand for when no one is watching? What values guide you when there's no audience, no likes, no approval to win? That is your standard. And once you commit to it, you become unstoppable. Living this way isn't about arrogance. It's not about saying, I don't care about anyone. It's about clarity. You care deeply but selectively. You no longer allow shallow judgments to dictate your path. You no longer shape your life around what they say. Instead, you shape it around who you choose to be. And here's the irony. When you stop seeking validation, you become more respected than ever. You don't need to preach it. You don't need to announce it. As Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. When you embody it, your life becomes the lesson. Your discipline speaks louder than your defense. Your self-respect speaks louder than their disrespect. Your calm presence speaks louder than any argument. You don't need to convince anyone they see it. And whether they admire it or resent it doesn't matter, because you no longer depend on their response. This is the completion of the silent journey, from withdrawal to growth to detachment to boundaries to disappearance to indifference, and finally, to living as your own standard. At this point, you've achieved the ultimate Stoic goal: inner freedom. No one owns your peace. No one dictates your worth. You decide. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If today you stopped caring about approval, if today you lived only by your own values, what would change? What would you walk away from? What would you finally begin? That's the essence of Silent Move 7. Live as your own standard. Not in arrogance, but in truth. Not to prove anything, but to embody everything you've worked for. Because when you live this way, your silence becomes not just a response, it becomes a message. A message that says, I don't need to explain. We've now walked through the full journey. 7 silent moves, 7 choices that shift the balance of power without you ever raising your voice. From withdrawing access, to growing in private, to becoming emotionally unavailable, to enforcing boundaries, to disappearing with dignity, to mastering indifference, and finally, to living as your own standard. And when you look back, you'll realize something profound. Silence was never weakness. Silence was strength all along. The world often tells us that power comes from being louder, sharper, quicker with our words. But the Stoics taught us a different truth, that power lies in self-mastery. Epictetus reminded us, no man is free who is not master of himself. Silence, used wisely, is how you reclaim that freedom. It's how you stop being a puppet to other people's chaos and start being the author of your own peace. Think about your own life for a moment. How many arguments have left you feeling empty? How many explanations fell on deaf ears? How many times did you try to prove your worth, only to realize later that you didn't need to? If you're honest, you already know. The battles you didn't fight, the times you stayed silent, the moments you walked away, those were the moments you truly grew. Silence is not passive. It is not surrender. It is a decision. A decision to choose peace over chaos, clarity over noise, wisdom over ego. And when you embrace it, silence becomes your greatest teacher, your greatest shield, your greatest statement. The message of Stoicism is simple but radical. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to seek approval from people who never valued you. Your only responsibility is to decide who and what deserves a place in your life, and to let go of everything that doesn't. That's why the greatest revenge is not retaliation, it's elevation. The greatest response to disrespect is not explanation, it's absence. And the greatest show of strength is not in words, it's in silence. So here's my invitation to you. The next time you're provoked, disrespected, or underestimated, don't rush to respond. Don't hand your peace to someone else. Take a breath, step back, and remember, your silence can be louder than anything you could say. Because at the end of the day, you are not defined by their noise. You are defined by your choices. And the choice to be silent, to walk away, to hold your peace, that is the choice of a person who truly understands their worth. So let this be your mantra moving forward. My silence is my strength. Say it again, louder in your heart this time. My silence is my strength. Carry that with you into every room, every relationship, every challenge. And watch how it transforms not just how others treat you, but how you see yourself. Because from this point forward, you don't need to explain a thing. You are the message.